Hello, today we're going to talk about SQL reporting software, bringing common sense software to the production floor for material consumption, proof of recipes, and much more. But before we begin, let's talk a little bit about the goal of the processor. I think most processors would agree that today we want to operate with as much data as possible so we can verify material ratios, confirm material consumption, make common sense decisions about material inventories, and of course, profit and loss determinations. We know how many parts or we know how many feet of a product we're producing, but what goes into it? We always want to assess the energy, the labor, and of course, the material. But also, one of the goals is to minimize complexity, minimize manual data collection, the need to do math, the need to create manual reports. So we want to use automated processes whenever possible. So towards that goal, there's several steps we can take to make sure we can automate as much as possible. Step one would be to weigh all materials and additives. Now this, of course, is done very easily with gravimetric blending equipment. It keeps track of all material weight readings automatically. In order to use its gravimetric precision, by nature, it weighs all the materials in use. But this doesn't have to be our traditional definition of a batch type blender as we show in this slide. The gravimetric device in use could also be a continuous blender. Now the ones we show here on these little processing machine shapes are actually loss in weight type blenders, typically used in extrusion. And as we consider gravimetric precision, we can get right by blenders and we can use just simply weigh hoppers. Weigh hoppers will weigh whatever amount of material passes through them from whatever device is above them to the processing machine below. Step two in this process is very logical. Simply record the data because we are now keeping track of all the ingredients and all the weight of the ingredients as they pass through individual blenders or weigh hoppers. We can simply record them. Go to their controls and record recipes, consumption for yield reports, quality control, and so forth. And we can see a little guy there with the pad recording these. Now, once again, we may be looking at some human error. We may be looking at some math errors by this method. One way to further simplify that is to electronically gather data. And we can see from this little illustration here, we can print it to a report directly from the blender. We can use a thumb drive to plug into the blender control to retrieve the data, or we can actually hook up a blender to a computer so that information is tapped from those different blenders to give up their collected data. This is very efficient, and this is state-of-the-art for many, many plants around the country. But step four actually illustrates the best way to gather data. Is we close the loop with SQL reporting software. So we network all of the blenders together and use SQL software and record everything. And a very key point of SQL reporting software is that the information flows automatically. So whether we want it or not, once SQL is installed, information is flowing from each of those resources into the SQL program for our use, for our manipulation, for our inclusion in other reports, and so forth. So current and historical data is always available for our use, and this is kind of the magic of SQL. So let's dig a little deeper. What is SQL? SQL means Structured Query Language, and it lets users access and manipulate data, info, for detailed reports. So what can SQL do? It can execute queries against a database. Now once again, the information is flowing into that database all the time. So what can we do? We can execute queries against that to find the information we need. So we can retrieve data from that database. We can even insert records into an existing database or report. We have the information available. We can manipulate it any way we want. So SQL automatically collects material data information from all connected sources. The familiar user interface is a Windows-based application summoned by an icon on the user's PC. So this is not a specific product from Conair or any other supplier. This is a very common product from Windows. And so it is supported, and it makes navigation and use very, very simple and widely supported. So how do we connect SQL to our system? Well, we see a couple examples there. These are actually on the far left there. We have a couple Blender controls. They're touch screens. We simply take an Ethernet connection from those touch screens, put them into a network hub so that we can apply more, as we're showing down there below, with that very common connector, the connector you're probably using right this minute on the computer you're viewing this video on. We use standard Ethernet data cables, put that into a centralized computer. An SQL button will appear, and then we have the information flowing. And this can be used, once again, for material consumption reports, yield reports, and so forth. Now, the interesting thing about SQL is it may already be in use in your plant. It is a commonly used data collection and report generating software application. Once again, this is not a product of Conair or any other Blender supplier. This is a product of Windows, and it is a general business application. So it is widely supported and, once again, may already be in use in your plant. So to summarize the benefits of SQL, it is Microsoft Windows supported. It may already be in use in some operations. It is a commonly used data collection and business report generating software application. All updates, advancements, questions, and manipulation are supported by a popular software supplier. You may have heard of Microsoft Windows. And so it's standard business software, not a custom solution, nothing you need to go back to the Blender manufacturer for support. It comes to you the same way support for your PC comes to you. So SQL reporting capability. It provides a user interface that collects material data information. So what does the user do? The user can select a report type, and there are a number of standardized reports already built into the software. They can select the Blender name, or the component number, or the recipe name. Up to 1,000 recipes are capable of being stored. The job name, that would be your job name for the type of product that you're molding or extruding. Or the resin name, 250 different resin names can be stored. And as long as the same resin name is used throughout the operation, it can collect information on that resin no matter where it is used. Once the report is generated, it can be viewed, printed, saved, or even the data can be included in other reports that you are doing for the benefit of your business. And each report can be automatically executed over a given time frame. So as an example, to create a report, enter the date range. What period of time do you want to look at? Select the report type and the collection criteria, where you're going to collect it from, and so forth. And then the report is generated. It's literally that simple. So, is SQL right for your operation? Well, we have a little checklist here. Number one, we need gravimetric controls to record the weight of the materials. That can be done with Conair's TrueBlend, as long as it is equipped with what we call an SB2 control. That's our second generation control. Or it can be with a Conair TrueWay blender. This is a continuous blender, as we mentioned before, that is typically used on extrusion operations. Or it can be through the use of TrueWay hoppers. These are those individual hoppers that can be fed with from any one of a number of sources, and it weighs the material as it passes through. All these controls, just the controls, are networked together into a common Windows PC by the method we described before. We implement the SQL software on the PC and identify each blender. With the software, each blender has an address, and so we simply need to identify it. Then we can create the desired reports and proper timing, scheduled or at random, and so forth. What are the benefits of SQL? Well, we like to say smart decisions are driven by smart planning and driven by smart data. So you can have automatic reporting, use of a universal format, nothing created specifically for a particular brand of blender, but a universal format that you are very familiar with. Data that can be accessed in real time, and data that can be accessed as a historical record. You can go back in time to pull data forward. And it uses an existing business solution software. Is anybody interested in the pricing of SQL software? I'm sure you are, and you can check with your Conair representative for that. But the way it is sold is for each blender control. And as you can see along the lower line there's a price tag associated with tapping into that resource on each blender. But on a system that is using way hoppers, as we're kind of showing in the upper right there, no cost for those individual hoppers. It is simply a cost for the central control, the touch screen, in other words, that is priced to allow it to be tapped for SQL type of information. Now, we made mention of Conair blenders that use SB2 control software. There is actually a solution for SB1 controlled Conair blenders if you happen to own one of those, and it's a program called TB Reports. Now, TB Reports only tracks by individual blenders, and data is delivered to an Excel spreadsheet type of file format. But SQL provides a superior ease of use, flexibility, and industry commonality. So it might behoove you to update to SB2s so that you can employ SQL software. You can read about this on your own with the brochure that we have pictured here. And as we show in the lower right-hand corner there, that is available at www.conairgroup.com. In this brochure, you'll see much of what we've talked about here today. It'll show you some sample reports and outline the way that SQL could be implemented into your plant. And once again, don't forget, it may already be in use in your plant and other aspects of your business. SQL Reporting Software User Guide, of course, comes along with any SQL reporting software package. But it's also available upon request. Talk to your Conair representative or call Conair to peruse this very, very detailed manual that will show you the pre-formatted report guidelines and so forth, and also how to implement this into your extrusion or injection molding blending systems. Now let's take a quick look at some of these pre-formatted reports. Here's one right here, and this is called resin usage by recipe. And we can see there at the very top the filter. That's actually the date, time frame that this report was pulled from. It looks like it's about a month back in 2013. And what we have done is looked at the components and the material usages over the course of several recipes. We can see the recipes listed on the left-hand side of that report: a flange assembly, a plate round, recipe 1, recipe 2, recipe 3, and so forth. The material code, the material names, the total pounds brought through that, and then a description. And of course, there's a default material description in there. But this is one example of a pre-formatted report, rather attractive, I might say. And this comes with your SQL software reporting package, is a pre-formatted report, resin usage by recipe. And here's another. This one is referred to as resin usage by shift. So we have a date, we have a range, a filter at the top, and then they are called out individually. So the date, 8/26/2013, is shown on the left, shift 1, 2, and 3. And then the material codes, material names, the total pounds. We can see that we're doing a little bit more on shift 1 than we are 2 and 3, but this is exactly some of the power that can be represented by these types of reports. And once again, these reports can be arranged to be created on a timed basis or upon demand. And lastly, here is a representation of a very powerful report. This is simply resin usage. Now once again, if you use a similar resin name, an identical resin name for the resin, whether it's used in machine 1 or machine 37, then you can pull a resin usage report. And in this particular case, there's the material code down the left-hand side, the name that is given to that, and then the total pounds at consumption. This can be plant-wide, this can be for a range of machines, this can be for per shift, this can be per job, and so forth. Very, very, very powerful manipulation of data from SQL reporting software. I hope this has been an informative walk through SQL reporting software. Once again, we're bringing common sense software to the production floor for material consumption, proof of recipes, and much more. Thank you very much for your time and attention.